Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 292. Today, I have the distinct honor of sitting down with Tim Coleman in his shop and hearing the story of how he got started in woodworking and what inspired him and what made him the maker, the woodworker, the creator that he is today. There are very, very few woodworkers that I can think of, especially in the studio furniture world, that hit on all of the levels that Tim Coleman hits on. So join me hanging out with Tim Coleman. Real quick, I just want to let everyone know I'm up there getting ready to record a video workshop. And if you're a finewoodworking.com member, right now is a pretty exciting time. We've got Dan Fea's video workshop on building a Queen Anne chair coming out soon, or it will start to come out soon. It's going to be a long one. And I'm excited to get going on Tim's video workshop, building a cabinet on stand. There's a lot of really cool video workshops headed your way for the finewoodworking.com members, and I am excited for us all. All right, on with the show. Tim, when I think of your work, it feels like the work that it was bestowed upon you by the gods of woodworking. You are, just given this talent
with a bolt of lightning.
Yes, exactly. That is how I imagine it happening. Was it always that way? What was it? Did you ever make things that weren't just magnificent and beautiful?
Yes. Let's not beat around the bush.
Okay.
It originates from a comfort in this space of making things, and making things specifically with wood. And in that space includes working with raw materials, having ideas, bringing the raw materials together, and problem solving, and having knowing what I want to have it come out like, but being flexible about where it goes along the way. So a comfort with being in that place and having it all make sense to me that, oh, yes, I can gather these materials, I can have this idea, and I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out how to get to where I'm hoping to go.
So at no point in currently, obviously, in the middle of a project, you don't ever sit there and go, oh man, what am I going to do? Or what did I just do? Or whatever. You don't have those moments of fear anymore?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, gripping fear. No, it's true. And sometimes in the past, that fear came from not wanting to screw up something important, and being down to material that you don't have much of, and high stakes in that way. Also early on, feeling like my skills maybe weren't quite up to the task. And in my professional furniture making, woodworking, I've been open to and lucky that I've had a diverse range of projects that really forced my skills, and often took me into uncomfortable places where I wasn't sure how I was going to pull this off. And that is scary. It's scary especially when you've committed. Well, if it's a commission job, you've committed once you say yes, and that in itself can be daunting to just get to the point where you say, okay, yeah, I'll do this, and forget about the fact that this is really outside my comfort zone. And that's how I've grown in terms of my skills, is doing a lot of commissioned type work that draws me way out of my comfort zone. And this has happened with several recreations of historic pieces. Often if there's a lot of my carving skills now are way better than before I took on some of those jobs that involved learning to carve, really, and just what the nuances of a carved leaf looks like, and just seeing what the original was, having photos of it, and trying to replicate just the 3D realism of that leaf is just incredibly difficult. I mean, I didn't realize how, it looks like, oh yeah, you just make your chisel strokes, but there's just so many subtleties to get that lifelike feeling in that type of carving. So being pushed outside my comfort zone in projects like that have really helped me grow my skill set and my confidence.
So when I think of your work, you are probably one of the most identifiable designers out there these days. And I think there's no way that Tim Coleman does or did or whatever replicas. Do you think that the time spent doing that informed your original work as well?
Not to a great degree.
Okay.
I wouldn't say they're more skill oriented.
Okay.
However, I've with those projects, they were well designed pieces, and being exposed to well designed things and seeing them up close when possible, and then also being able to break them down into their constructive components. But being exposed to well-designed things has definitely informed my work. And that's when I say well-designed things, for me, a lot of that is proportions, the proportions of parts to the whole, the overall proportions of it, the height to width. And that informs my design sense a lot. Like, I get to see, oh yeah, I can see that's the proportions of that piece are really make me feel at ease. And so I try to bring that same feeling into my own designs, and it helps me when I'm designing and I am looking at a mock-up, for instance, of one of my own pieces, to feel that unease of, that's not hitting it for me there. And then knowing where to go from there, what to do to bring it to the place where it feels, oh, okay, yeah. Can exhale.
I mean, I guess also if you're looking at period pieces or whatever, we just went down to Colonial Williamsburg, and there were pieces in the museum there that I was like, wow, I can't believe that still exists. Like, they were able to get away with making those legs so small or whatever. And maybe it would help you to see how far you can push things and still have them be around 200 years later, Yes,
I would agree. And all it takes is one careless move of a piece of furniture to do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
But interestingly, and I haven't done a lot of those recreations of pieces, and I call them recreations because these are for museum homes. And there's been a shift in museum homes where in the past they would not replicate pieces that were original to the home, but now they're more willing to do that. So in the past, they might just have a photo, if they had a photo of what the room originally looked like, but now they're much more willing to replicate those pieces and try to do them in as an authentic way as possible in terms of materials and details. So I haven't done a lot of those, but the few I've done have been really informative from a design standpoint. And structurally, construction-wise, I did 2 large tables for a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Buffalo, New York, the Darwin Martin house. That was the first historic recreation job that I had, and it was fascinating to kind of get insight into the world of Frank Lloyd Wright and furniture design, and how some of those designs were eventually discarded by the owners because they were uncomfortable or too massive. But with the Frank Lloyd Wright job, one of the key components of these two tables is that the tops were made with lumber core. And that was my, not my first exposure to lumber core, but it was my first exposure to it in a large scale. These were, 6 feet wide tables. And to see that, and with, mitered frames on them, and, a 6 foot wide table with a mitered frame, if you tried to do that on a solid wood top, it would just blow the miters apart as the top expanded and contracted. But the lumber core showed me then that, wow, these miters are as tight as the day they were made, and so that's a stable substrate. So it introduced me to lumber core in a larger scale, and I've really run with it since.
So we are the reason why I'm up here in your shop is because we're doing pre-production for a video series that we'll be shooting soon, but one of the big draws is lumber core for that video series. So if hang on, there's going to be a lot of lumber core to come. But can you give us a quick definition of lumber core?
Lumber core is a veneer substrate. I'm going to talk about it as a veneer substrate, and it is made up of staves of wood that are the thickness of. You start with the overall thickness of the panel that you want. You have face veneers on either side. You have cross-banding veneer, a thick veneer, 16th inch, on either side of your lumber staves. And so that's, you're working down. So the core, the staves of your panel are working down from that overall thickness to the core material. So let's say you want a 3/4 inch thick, finished at a 3/4 inch thick panel. Your staves might only be a 1/2 inch, because then you're adding an 1/8 inch for your cross banding and another 1/8 inch for your face veneers. Did I do the math right?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not going to question Tim Coleman.
Anyway, a lumber core panel is made up of solid wood staves that are running in the same direction that your face veneer is going, followed by, on either side of those solid wood staves, cross banding, so a veneer, a 16th inch thick veneer that runs crosswise to those staves, and then your top and bottom veneers are glued to that. So the lumber core substrate is an assembled, glued together packet of staves and cross banding.
But those staves are not glued to each other.
The staves are not glued to each other. In fact, they have a very little space in between, and that space comes from just going through the milling process. And I'm usually cutting those staves on the bandsaw, and so the edges, as they are edge to edge, they might be bandsaw edge to bandsaw edge. So that leaves just a very little incremental gap for those staves to do whatever movement they have, so that the entire panel doesn't move in its overall dimension.
So the core, the staves are moving on their own.
On their own, even though they're restricted by the crossband.
Yeah,
but they also have the ability to move ever so slightly.
So, but in the end, you wind up with a veneered panel where you get to pick your veneer, marquetry, whatever you want to do. And it is a solid wood substrate. It can be pretty much whatever size you need it to be.
Mm-hmm. You have complete control over the thickness.
Yeah. So, so we'll be doing some of that in a little bit. But it is certainly one of those things that felt like magic. And the first time I saw you do it, I thought, wait, no, he's going to have wood movement issues. And then the further I looked into it, it's like, oh no, it turns out that Tim Coleman really does know what he's doing.
I didn't always.
Well, let's talk about didn't always.
Yes.
So you get started in your parents' basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or
yep. Yes. So I grew up. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and we're all very close in age. So it was a full house, and not a big house either. And a refuge for me was into the basement, and I had just a pull down table with legs that folded out, and a pegboard on the wall with some tools hung there, and just going down and making things, and especially in the winter, in the rest of the year when I could be outside, I was generally doing outdoor things. Mm-hmm. And just again, going back to just the comfort of being in that place of working with my hands and making things, and having fixing things that weren't broken was a big part of it.
Yeah.
Pulling apart clocks and mm-hmm. Electric and oh man, one of my earliest tools was a handheld, electric jigsaw that I asked for Christmas, and there it was at Christmas morning, and a joyful experience. But somewhere in my journey with that tool, I wanted to see more about how it worked. And a tip for you: when you've got your electric hand tool separated, the body is separated, don't plug it in and turn it on.
Oh no!
Because things tend to fly in all different directions. But I learned that not to do that again. So it really was just a fascination with how things work and how I could make my own ideas work.
What was the first time that you thought, like, maybe I could be a furniture maker for a living?
That was something I wasn't exposed to as a kid. It was suburbs outside of Providence, Rhode Island, so coastal suburb, and it was largely professional people. I didn't know anyone who made things with. Well, there was a neighbor up the street, and he had a radial arm saw, which. That thing just, I mean, he showed me he did the simplest things, which was mostly just cross-cutting. And I knew that the machine had a lot of capabilities because it had a lot of knobs and, and bars but it was a terrifying looking machine. There was, nothing about it that was friendly. That's for sure. Anyway, he was the only one I knew, anywhere nearby who had a tool in their garage other than a lawnmower. And so it wasn't until after college and I wanted to engage in making things, and I felt that the shortest route was to learn how to build houses. So just went all over where I happened to be living at the time, and everywhere I saw, someone building a house, I'd just stop in and say, "Hey, are you hiring anybody?" And I didn't have any experience, so they were generous. And I was definitely low man on the totem pole. So there were a lot of tasks that I did, but being exposed to what was happening and building a house, there's a sequence that the whole thing unfolds that doesn't get messed with a lot. So once you get exposed to that sequence over and over, and you realize, oh, okay, this is what you do first, this is what you do next, and blah, blah, blah. So that was my introduction to kind of really making things on a bigger scale, certainly with homes, but also just engaging in that and having guidance from other people, input on how you do things, how you what weight of hammer is the correct weight if you're going to be framing versus finishing. So just being exposed to all the nuances of construction and carpentry. And it wasn't until so I finished college in '83, and built houses for a couple of years, and then moved to Seattle, Washington in late '85, and moved out there with who's now my wife, Mary Beth at the time, and exposed in Seattle to this scene of people who made furniture for a living. And I thought, wow, how come nobody ever told me that you could do that? And the scale of furniture and the process involved, and all the exotic woods and hardwoods in general, as opposed to the softwoods that you're typically exposed to with home construction. So the whole package, the tools, the process, the materials, and the tradition of it, and that these are techniques that have been used for generations upon generations, and so it was just enormously appealing. Plus, seeing this contemporary work that these people were doing was so exciting, to think that, and you can be artistic with it, and you don't have to follow just this kind of rigid, didactic way of making a piece of furniture. So the expressive nature of it was appealing to me as well. So the package just got bigger and bigger, the more I delved into it. And I was lucky that there was one individual. There was a gallery in Seattle called the Northwest Gallery of Fine Woodworking, and it was a cooperative gallery where they had hired someone to staff the gallery. So they hired an actual professional person rather than a woodworker sitting there with trying to kind of explain or sell these things.
Talk to regular people.
Exactly. And it was a diverse group of makers that were part of the cooperative, gender diverse. It was and age-wise, it was spanned maybe people in their 20s up through their 60s. So it was a pretty good sampling. The person who there was one individual, Kurt Manier, who offered an apprenticeship where he would take on an apprentice for 6 months, an unpaid position, and he was just finishing with one of his apprentices. Catherine was just finishing with him, and so that possibility was there for me. And so I went and had a talk with him, and he said, are you familiar with other makers in the field? And I said, no, not really. I'd never read Fine Woodworking magazine. I saw it on a newsstand once, and probably bought a copy, but did not have a deep knowledge of what was going on. And he said, and so there's this guy who's given a talk out in Redmond at a woodcraft store. You might just be interested in kind of hearing what he has to say. So Krenov was the person who was giving that talk.
This guy.
And so that was my introduction to Krenov and his way of looking at material and process. And in his presentation, he showed a lot of, it was almost exclusively student work that he was showing. And that was that way that he had about talking about his students and the work that they were doing, and that there's a school that this is happening at, that really crystallized things for me. Before I even started that apprenticeship, and thought, oh, wow, this is what I want to be doing. And things just kept leading in that direction.
Did you wind up doing the apprenticeship?
I did. I did the apprenticeship. I spent a year with him, actually. And during that time, Kurt's shop was in a cooperative shop space as well. It was called Second Floor Woodworks in Seattle, Washington, down in Pioneer Square, the old part of Seattle. They were on the second floor, just one big open space with 10 different makers, each doing their own thing there and sharing the equipment. And they were doing things. One fellow was making some kind of limited production jewelry boxes. Someone else was doing these real beautiful torsos, the carved torsos, and often, they were hollowing them out completely and kind of breaking them apart in some ways. So there was a lot of empty space. And a couple of people who were just doing commissioned furniture work, and a few others who were just doing it for their own pleasure. So it was a great environment to see. Oh wow, there's all these different ways that you can engage with this material and the process. And if you have a good solid setup of equipment, you can do a lot of different things. And so, yes, the apprenticeship with Kurt lasted a year. And next door, there was a smaller shop, and one of the people in that shop, Bill Walker, had been a student at the Krenov School, formerly the College of the Redwoods. So I was going over there to Bill's shop all the time, and I know he got really tired of me coming over with my parts of the hand plane that I was trying to make from one of Krenov's books, and showing him where I was stuck. And but he was really generous with his time towards me, and could just tell that here's an eager beaver here. The easiest way to get rid of him is just answer a few questions and say, come back later. So after my apprenticeship with Kurt, I went to a summer class at the college, and it was a tools and techniques class, a 3-week class. Upon returning to Seattle after that summer class, one of Bill Walker's shopmates, Ross Day, was going down to the college to spend 9 months there. And I was able to take his bench space while he was there. And so then to be able to work in the workshop where Bill was doing his work. And there was another individual, Stuart Wirtz, who had he had been in the program in artisanry at Boston University in the 80s. And he'd been living in Homer, Alaska, and came down to Seattle to kind of set up his shop. So he was a tremendous Bill Walker and Stuart Wirtz, to this day, and to me at that time, two of the best maker designers
Really?
that I've ever been in the company of, and just really sweet people. And so to be in that environment, and they were schooled, so each one of them had been to their own school, Stuart at Boston and Bill at the Krenov School. And just standout students, each one of them in their respective, schools. So, and both of them were also exhibiting their work at a gallery in East Hampton, Long Island, Pridham and Eames, who I was learning at the time was one of the premier galleries, showcases for handmade furniture in the country. And so both Bill and Stuart had an affiliation with Pridham and Eames, and so everything was just feeding me high quality, expressive, everything that I was ripe for was just being kind of, dropped in my lap.
Well, yeah, it sounds like dropped in your lap, the way that you put it, but you were smart enough to put yourselves in situations to be around talented makers.
That's very true. And the only way to do that is to not make any money.
Yeah.
But when you're, in your early mid-20s, and at the time Seattle was actually pretty affordable. Our apartment was $350 a month for a really nice apartment on Capitol Hill. It's 5 times that now, I'm sure. But yes, fortunately, being in a city where there were all these influences packed into a relatively small place, and not having to make a lot of money to cover the nut. Yes, I did put myself there, and willingly, just dug in and didn't think about what money I wasn't making.
Yeah. You were there, for the love of the craft, and obviously it worked out for you. But yeah, that takes an amount of bravery, though, too.
Yeah, which didn't end. Probably. But
bravery, stupidity.
No,
whatever.
It is. It's all. Yeah. Well, those two things go like hand in glove sometimes.
Yeah.
Especially for adolescents. But it didn't feel like that at the time. Although, and honestly, like some of that, the anxiety of as move a little bit further and more responsibilities and a little bit bigger nut to cover with income. That's more where the bravery came in, was to like not get overly stressed out about that, and to try to come to some peace with the fact that, everybody I know is doing this amazing stuff. None of them are making a lot of money. And, but at the same time, there's always that, hope that you do. And, but coming to some peace with that reality. And the more personal work you want to do, the more you're pushing yourself into that place. And for better or worse, I just was always pushing myself in that place. And I can't, it's hard to even, thinking back, it's been, some things haven't changed. and that's one of them, is that I've had to come to a peace with the choices that I've made, and they're choices. I'm not going to. No one's forced me to do this. But there's been many points of choice along the way where I had to recommit to this is what's valuable about what I have to offer. This is what really puts me in a comfortable, productive place. And I can work. I can dig in. I can get a lot of work done. Well, I can put in a lot of hours. Let's be real here. And those hours have gotten more productive as the years have gone by.
I can get some pieces made in the span of a lot of hours.
Yes. And coming to peace with that too.
Yes.
This is a process that takes time. That there's just that.
I think that's one of, even for hobbyists like myself, that's just, at some point you just accept, there's no way around this other than spending a lot of time doing this thing, whether that is, skills in the craft itself or shaping a leg, and getting all the
developing the skills overall, or the skills that are brought to hand at any given task.
Yeah. There's very few replacements for time. Yeah, I didn't know any of that. Super interesting, and I'm really glad you shared that journey with us because and the honesty of it, because there are a lot of people who I know listen to this podcast who maybe have it in their head that, like, there's a lot of money to be made as a furniture maker, and I can tell you most of my furniture maker friends are, do okay, but there's not a lot of money, and it's something you're doing because you love.
Generally, most of those who that I've been in close league with, that's been the case. But again, it does come back to choices, personal choices, and the personal choices that I've made. There are choices that can be made where you can boost your income, whether that's simplifying things, cutting down on the number of hours that it takes to create something, a perfectly valid, legitimate, starting point, really. Okay, I want to make a table. I want this table to retail for $1,200, and kind of working back from that. And that's my mind doesn't always work as well that way. It doesn't work as well, meaning I'm most excited and energized by having the vision of what it is that I'm setting out to do, and throwing myself at it. Really, that's what it is. It's just throwing myself at it, and everything else just kind of goes to the sides, and focus just comes right there on the thing that I'm working on, and it's what and the result of that, zeroing in on something and not hyper focus. I don't like the word hyper, really, because it's a extreme focus that I'm glad to give myself over to, and it has produced some pieces that I've made, and I look back and look. I can be just finishing it and think, wow, did I make that? I mean, honestly, it's like I've thrown myself into the process, and this thing comes out on the other side, and I'm not necessarily saying, wow, that's beautiful, that's great, I nailed it. Sometimes I do have that feeling, but more often it's just the amazement that, wow,
there it is.
There it is. And yeah, and so a lot of the pieces, cabinets that I've made, just my body of work in general, have come out of a place like that. And sometimes that place might occupy 3 months of time or more. Often it's less than that. Often it's between 4 and 8 weeks. A lot of the works that I've done are in that kind of time frame. But yes, it's that experience. And I mean, at this point in my life, 62 years old, I'm grateful that I've been able to engage in it as fully as I have all these years, and made money along the way, not always with these, original works that are just personal to me. But like the historic recreation and other types of commissions and commission pieces that are still my own design, but they're tailored to the client and their desires. And often with commission pieces like that, the commission will spur my own design that's a variation on what was designed for the client, because so often I'm like designing it for them and thinking, oh, well, if I weren't doing it for them, I might I might go in this direction with it. So some interesting speculative pieces that I've done over the years have grown out of commissions in that way.
That's a really healthy way of looking at it, where it's like, instead of like, ugh, why am I making this thing that I don't want to be making? But you're sitting there saying like, while you're going through the process, designing a pairing to it I like that.
No, it's and I think that's not an uncommon thing for people who, I mean, not every furniture maker, woodworker is well, first of all, they're not all in the professional world, and not all want to make speculative pieces. I mean, a speculative piece for a non-professional is likely going to go into their home or to a friend or a family member. So there's still the opportunities to take something that was a commission and expand it into something more personal.
Well, and something you said earlier reminded me is that when we started talking about doing this video series, we had, Mike and I were saying, oh, it'd be great to have, Tim Coleman do a cabinet on stand. And you had said, okay, well, let me know what elements you want. And Mike and I came up with a list. And just a minute ago, you're like, I know you wanted this, but that's not what it turned out to be. He goes, I tried, but this is what it is. And it was like, no, like we wanted Tim Coleman to do a thing, and something that you wanted to do first off too. But you sat down and, started making up a cabinet on stand, and the design had legs and it went where it wanted it to go, and you were like, that's just where it went.
Yeah, no, I think I filled the requirement, the assignment. Yeah. I did. Cabinet on stand.
Yeah. No, there were like little
yes, you had
tidbits that
things that you, and I mean, it's your project. I mean, it's your video content, and it's for your audience, and so you of course had things that would be based on my output over time.
Yes.
You said, oh, these types of things, this, the dowel construction, for instance, let's make sure it's got that. And so those parameters were pretty easy to manage.
But then with your design, you, at what point, along the way, do you say, oh, this is what I want to make,
And my design process, unlike the bolt of lightning that kind of gave me my superpowers, the designs emerge very slowly for me, and sometimes it's the kernel of the idea comes from a piece of furniture that I've seen. Sometimes it comes from some architectural element or theme. It can sometimes it comes from a decorative element I've seen in some part of the world, some cultural decorative theme, and it. Before it, and I usually have a notion. Okay, this notion that I have is going to be, if it's going to be a cabinet, it's going to be like a buffet styled cabinet, so kind of broad and not real high. Or these thoughts, images are suggesting more of like a cabinet on a stand with some openness in it, or a chest of drawers, or so the whatever the inspiration is pushes me into what that or I just have like a yearning to do a buffet styled cabinet. I love that kind of format and scale, just because it's low and broad and a lot of surface area for me to kind of play with and exercise my different veneering or other decorative techniques. So,
well, and
where were we?
Well, no, and you had said we were going over notes, and you had a bunch of sketches and a bunch of like processes written out and everything. And you had said, "Oh yeah, I probably just wrote this out while watching TV one night." And is that? Are you the type of person that you're always like focusing on one piece and trying to figure it out, trying to break it down?
Often. Yes. Once, and any of those given pieces, sometimes there's some key element of it that until that key unlocks something in the idea, it's hard to really focus it. But then, and so the cabinet that we're going to be doing, well, and this is funny. My wife, in this case and other times says, "Well, why don't you just do one that you've done before?" What's the fun in that? And however, now I have a body of work that stretches back, however many years, 35 years or so. There's more of my own work to be able to reference and bring in elements. So, for instance, this cabinet is based on some aspects of a chest of drawers that I did, 12 or 14 years ago, and the upper part of the chest of drawers, I'm using that element as the top of this cabinet, and it's a very striking element, simple but striking. And so that was kind of the key, in this concept of a cabinet on a stand. The key that unlocked the whole thing was, I can see how that element can work really well on this, and I'm going to just sort of develop it from there. And then a lot of other things kind of fell into place.
Do you ever find yourself like wanting to pull an element from an old piece to get another shot at it, to say, "Oh, I know how to do it differently, or even better, or whatever"?
Yep. And usually that's, I know how to do this more efficiently now.
Oh, interesting.
To get the same, the same, more or less the same result. And I mean, efficiency often I think is equated with speed. To me, efficiency is partly speed, but also getting a clean result without a lot of fuss. So, and sometimes it involves a router jig or some jigging up to get you there. But more often it's a sequence. What's the sequence of doing this process so that the end result is really clean? And if you get the steps in that sequence, if you're and so the first time you're doing it, you're making up the sequence as you go. So you've done it, and then you can kind of work back from that and say, oh, actually, if I had done this step first, then my result would have been a lot cleaner and less fussy. So I'm often bringing back processes that through having done it once, I can see, I want to do that again, and now it'll be fun.
It won't be as nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Do you keep personal notes?
Not a lot.
Okay.
In complex pieces, I have to make some checklists sometimes, but I like to work on complicated pieces without having a lot of other responsibilities of work that I have to be doing, so that I can truly focus. But that doesn't always happen. So when that isn't possible, then there's going to be more notes, and otherwise a lot just gets held in my head. And a lot of that being sequence. The sequence of the unfolding and sequence of specific techniques, and also overall sequence. Like you've got a piece of furniture you're going to make. What's the first thing you do? I mean, usually it's working with the raw material, milling, et cetera. But once you get past that, there might be a number of different, places that you can start your work. And so figuring out, what the sequence is and the most efficient sequence, so that you're not having to kind of go back and have yourself in a place that the only solution of how to go from here is this very fussy process that's just going to be, it's going to take a lot of time to do it and get the clean result that I want. There's no way around that. And regardless, sometimes you're in that place and you just have to accept that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Let's answer one.
I know. Okay. How long do you think it's going to be, Ben? Well, I mean, we're shoot for an hour.
4 hours. Let's go to one question.
Okay. I got one in me.
Which one do you want to do?
The one with the shortest answer. Let's see. Someone had a question about solid wood veneer on solid wood.
Might as well. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's in keeping with the conversation. Graham asks, I'm thinking of building an oak kitchen table with shop sawn veneered top. It'll probably take a beating over the years, and I'd like to be able to revisit it when the damage gets too bad and bring it back into line. Could I go as thick as 1/4 inch? Assuming a stable substrate, at what point does cross-grain expansion and contraction become a factor to take into consideration?
So this question, at first I was thinking veneer on solid wood, which is something that I also do a lot, where the veneered surface is running in the same direction as the substrate. This question is referring to shop sawn veneer on a stable substrate. So that's not going to be solid wood. Shop sawn veneer is almost all my veneer work is done with veneer that I saw on my bandsaw. 1/4 inch is not veneer anymore. There's no way around that. To me, anything over about 1/16 of an inch is no longer veneer. To me, the definition of veneer is wood that is cut thin enough so that the natural properties of expansion and contraction of the material are no longer relevant.
Okay.
And that might vary depending on the wood species. But in general, you go over 1/16 of an inch and you will begin to introduce. So 1/4 of an inch, while I understand that in theory gives you a lot of material to be able to resurface, redress the surface as it ages. You'd be surprised how much material 1/16 of an inch actually gives you.
Yeah.
And also thinking about what's acceptable over time as far as patina and just natural age and wear. I feel that 1/16 of an inch gives you enough material if you needed to take care of some damage, a heavy scratch or that really is unsettling to the owner. But 1/4 of an inch is no longer veneer, and there's no reason to go that thick.
Whenever I see something like this, I'm reminded of like all of the times I've needed to take a 64th off of a piece of wood and thought, oh, I'll just sand it out. And it takes forever.
Mm-hmm.
Like sanding 0.003 of an inch is a chore.
It is.
And so like, I don't know what process you envision in the future in which you would need 1/4 of an inch of leeway, you know?
Yeah. And it's, but I do understand the thinking around it,
yes,
and the insurance that you're giving yourself, but you're going to be introducing, I'm not sure exactly what would happen. Likely if you're putting, 1/4 inch thick veneer, it's going to start delaminating.
Yeah.
Something's going to happen, where the solid wood properties of a 1/4 inch thick piece are going to overcome the glue that holds it onto the substrate.
Yeah.
Even if you had 1/4 inch thick on the underside, it'll overpower.
And I'm sure that there's somebody out there saying, nope, but I did this, blah, 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 blah. But is this one of those opportunities where it's like chances are pretty good?
Chances are pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, because things have been gotten away with in furniture for centuries, and we've all seen that.
We just don't see the ones that didn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because they are cut up and turned into firewood.
Yeah. And if a piece of furniture that under the conditions in Arizona, or in an extremely dry climate versus New England, where you've got these great swings in humidity, if the piece resided in the stable environment where the humidity doesn't change, then things are going to be likely different. You might not have the same experience.
Yeah. Well, Tim, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to getting going on this video, and there will be a whole lot more of you around finewoodworking.com. And thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you, Ben. It was a great day here.
Yeah, good hanging out.
Beautiful day outside, and so thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for being here and having me be part of the fine woodworking universe.
Cool, right on. All right, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you again to Tim for spending the time with us and telling his story. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment on YouTube. Click that thumbs up button. Leave a comment on the show notes. As always, show notes are always available at shoptalklive.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.